I'm Mike Fletcher. I'm the chair of the Environmental Action Working Group at First U, and I have the privilege today to introduce today's program centered around mental health, spirituality, and the climate crisis. Early on, kind of at the beginning of this year, when we started working on the whole focus we've developed on climate change for the 4-year period, mental health came up early as an issue, and very appropriately. The scientific news is not good, and we know that as we educate people about climate change, there's bound to be quite a bit of consternation about what's locked in as bad news in the future and what we're going to have to work very, very hard to avoid to make things get worse. The news on climate change, I think, has gone from, environmental news in the 80s was a lot about, well, things don't seem to be trending right. This will have to change. It's not looking too good, to now tipping points. If this happens, that will happen, and things will get worse. And there's about a dozen of them, and about 7 of them are kind of initiated and making things worse. Think of the forest burning in many parts of the world. Think about the ice not covering as much of the world and less heat getting reflected, so the world gets warmer. That's a positive tipping point. So not to go into too much detail and to want to get back to the spiritual and the mental health aspect, which I'm so happy was identified. Today's program will center on that. It works on imaging, basically. Imagine the world the way we don't want it to be and the way we want it to be, and connect the dots in between. And I think that's very powerful. I wouldn't have been able to come up with it. And I'm so glad that others, both in the Environmental Action Working Group and the Mental Health Working Group, got on it and worked on it. So it'll be my pleasure now to introduce Suzanne Pellier. She's a retired HR professional, a mental health facilitator, and has been a member of the congregation for the past 2 years. I'll be back on at the end to help with questions and to wish us all a good day. And take it away, Suzanne.
Thank you, Mike. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm here just to give you a brief overview of the whole project. I had a privilege of working with Stockwell and with Sharon Bowen on this project through the summer. So thank you for allowing me to work with you. I'd like to start with a quote about confronting this environmental crisis. The most remarkable feature of this historical moment is not that we are on the way to destroying our world. It is that we are beginning to wake up, and as from a long millennia-long sleep, to a whole new relationship to our world, to ourselves, and to each other. And that's from Joanna Macy, the author of Active Hope. And as Mike has already stated, the Environmental Action Group and the Mental Health Working Group are working together on this joint project. It's in support of the First U's 4-year congregational focus on climate confrontation. And as I've already mentioned, I had the privilege of being able to work on this proposal through the summer. So our Hope in Action, Transforming Environmental Anxiety into Empowerment project is intended to help us individually and collectively move to a cleaner and greener world. And I think it's already been said that research has been proven that there's a direct and positive relationship between access to green space, natural environments, and people's perceived physical, mental health, resilience, overall well-being. And so these connections are very strong, and that has become the focus of this project. We know this relationship to nature is also particularly important among Canadian Indigenous peoples and those who have earth-based spirituality. So transforming fear into empowerment has 4 building blocks, and I'll speak about them only briefly today. Today, October 11th, is the launch of this project. And so it's our official launch and our welcome to all of you. So we warmly extend an invitation to all of you to join us on what I like to think of as this spiritual journey. And where applicable, please include your family, friends, youth, and other loved ones. So today's the launch. The second building block I'm really excited about, and that's Maury will be speaking about this shortly, is photo voice and storytelling. And we begin by inviting you to participate in this very unique, creative experience of combining two photos and with storytelling. And one photo will show the environment crisis as you perceive it, as you feel it, as you see it. And the second photo will demonstrate your perception of what is right with the world. And you'll be provided with two prompting questions to respond to that. And as I said, Maury will tell you a lot more in a moment. The third building block is the Hope Action Workshop, which will be facilitated by Patty Stockwell and myself. It's a 2-hour experiential and motivational workshop, and that will follow on in the spring of 2021. It's based on the book Active Hope, which was written by Joanna Macy, a long-term environmental activist and Buddhist, and Chris Johnston, who is a person who's worked with resilience, mental health, and addictions for many decades. In this workshop, we'll explore our inner feelings about the environmental crisis. We'll move towards an attitude of gratitude, of hope, and of committed action. And initially, we intend to offer it to 24 people in the congregation, ages 12 and up. And then down the road, further workshops will be offered to youth, potentially Ankura, and others. We hope that other facilitators will come on board and join us in offering that to the congregation. The final building block is called, well, it's a follow-up. It's perhaps a celebration of what we've accomplished so far. And that will be a year from now. We hope to present that through Earth Speaks. And in this follow-up phase, we'll examine the strands of all the parts of this project and how they've come together. And we'll review what have we, review and assess how have we done so far, where are we going, and we'll look at what we've done individually, what we've accomplished collectively, and where we want to go moving forward. So that being said, in a nutshell, that is the 4 building blocks of the project. And now I'd like to introduce Maury. I'll give you a brief bio of Maury. He's been a member of the First U Ottawa since 2003. He's served in many roles, including president from 2014 to 2016. Maury grew up, lucky Maury, in West Vancouver, BC, and has been taking photos since the age of 16. He first came to Ottawa in 1973 to work in software development for Bell Northern Research, and this was the start of his 31-year first career with B&R and Nortel, including working in North Carolina from 2007 to 2000, and Paris, France, from 2000 to 2003. Maury has also had a second career in fundraising since 2007 and until his second retirement in 2015, mostly with the University of Ottawa. So I turn it over to you, Maury.
Thank you, Mike and Suzanne, for your introductions. As Suzanne said, I first got involved in photography at the age of 16. It was 1967, Canada's centennial year, and I was part of a group participating in a federal youth travel program called Centennial Travelers. And our group from the Vancouver area was going to Edmundston, New Brunswick. So my dad said, well, you need to have a camera. So it turned out we had a spare 35 millimeter camera kicking around in our attic that he knew how to use. So he got it out for me and showed me how to use it, and also wrote down some instructions. And I ended up using that camera until 2005. And it was a 35 millimeter film camera with a rangefinder, for those of you who know what that means, kind of old technology. And I always used color slide film. So I was a slide type photographer. So I got many, I took, I think while I had that camera, on the order of 300 rolls of slides, mostly on 36 picture films. And I purchased my first digital camera at the beginning of 2005, when Marilyn and I were getting ready to go on a trip to New Zealand and Australia. So it was time to go digital. And I think I'm now on my 4th or 5th digital camera. And since 2015, my camera has been my iPhone. And just this August, I upgraded from an iPhone 6 to an iPhone 11, which is even more powerful in terms of its photo capabilities. My oldest sister was a professional photojournalist as her career. My father was also a very good photographer. So it kind of came in at least in half of our family. At the beginning of this year, or late last year, after Marilyn's death, we had a Facebook account in her name, and I had to decide what to do with it. And it actually turned out to be easier to just put it in my name than to delete it. So that's what I did. And then in early January, I had lunch with a couple of really good friends who travel a lot, and I had always followed their travels through Facebook, and they were getting ready to travel for the better part of a year, and they said, you know, we'd like to see what you're doing. Why don't you post things regularly in Facebook? So I started doing that, and so ever since early January, I've been posting fairly regularly, probably 3 or 4 times a month. It just happens that most of my photos are outdoors in nature, because that's always been one of my spiritual places and one of the places where I feel most comfortable and most connected. It's not that I don't take pictures of people. Some of my photo albums in Facebook do include people, and they even include a few videos. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen and show you an example of one thing that one of my recent photo albums. So a week ago yesterday, I went with a friend walking in Mer Bleu, which is probably familiar to quite a few of you. And I ended up putting 17 photos in this album. So you can see that in a Facebook photo album, you can give it a title. I called it Mer Bleu Revisited because I had been there in June and had done another photo album then. And you can give a description to the overall album. And then you can also, as you should be able to see here on the right-hand side of the screen, you can caption the individual photos. And I'll just show a few examples of that. So this is one, the friend I was walking with knew the identity of these flowers, but one of the things that happens sometimes is I'm not sure what I'm seeing, so I'll ask in my Facebook posts, do people know what this is? And I often get good answers. They don't always agree, but usually they do. So I've also observed, yeah, this was the example here that I wasn't absolutely certain what kind of tree this is. It was a small tree. It's not a maple, clearly. And one of Marilyn's first cousins replied that it may be what's called a burning bush, and I think she's right. And I don't know the scientific name for that. There's actually one just outside at the bottom of the steps into our congregation building. So I'm going to get out of that now. I just observed that I've noticed other people in our congregation doing something very similar. For example, on Tuesday of this past week, I did another posting of 5 photos from going up into Gatineau Park. And on the same day, David Chernyshenko had ridden his bike up there, and he did the same thing. He posted some photos and put Facebook. I've seen Leslie Baird do it. Jen Brennan has been posting things. And there's someone else whose name is escaping me momentarily who did it just this morning or since last night. So I'm now going to show you a video, and I thank Sharon Bowen for suggesting this video, because it really fits the theme of what we're trying to do so well. And with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share this. Just bear with me. It'll take a little bit of time to get it started. And here we go.
I spent a large part of my life as a photographer for National Geographic. World's greatest job. Well, that job, it changed my life in a very surprising way. And that's the story I want to share with you tonight. It began long before I ever picked up a camera. My family had taken the magazine for years. The time I got to be able to read, I'd grab it when it came into the house. I'd take it upstairs. I'd read it at night. My dad would say, "Turn off the light, DeWitt, go to bed." I'd turn the light back on. You know, I'd get a flashlight. I'd stay up and stare at the pictures in this little yellow book. Pictures that showed me the possibilities the world had to offer. I never thought I'd work for them. I never thought I'd shoot for them. But they were already changing the way I looked at the world. Because the Geographic has an extraordinary vision. So simple, yet so profound. What they charged me with, every time they sent me out, was to celebrate what was right with the world, rather than wallowing in what was wrong with it. That's why we keep these little yellow magazines. It's a national sacrilege to throw one away. You know that. If all the Geographics in the world disappeared at one time, half the houses would fall in on themselves. Because they're supported by big yellow columns in the basement. Why? Because they celebrate what's right with the world. When I first began at the Geographic, I had no idea how powerful that vision would be, how much it would change my life. But our vision controls our perception, and our perception becomes our reality. From the highest mountains, to rivers drenched in sunlight, to waterfalls and rainbows. Everywhere I looked, there would be amazing beauty for me to photograph. And you know, in the Geographic's view, man was not something separate from this, just as magical as anything else on the planet. And the more I just went out and celebrated the best in humanity, the more I could see it. I could see it, and I could see it in the faces of those at work, or the body language of those at play, those in their youth, or in their age. I thought this would be a good picture before he smiled, right? I could see it. I could see that light that shines not on us, but from within us. From within us, when we have the courage to let it out. It was the same light I'd seen in nature that didn't seem to have to trust to expose itself, but just graced us every day with the delicacy of a flower or the light of a breaking storm. And yet, you know, the more I shot for the Geographic, the more I found this strange conflict growing up between the worldview of the Geographic and the worldview that I'd been raised in since I was a kid. I mean, you all know it. The law of the jungle, eat or be eaten, my win is your loss, second place is the first loser. God, I once saw that on a t-shirt. That is a very depressing way to look at life. You know, far too many of us do see the world in that light. A world based on fear and scarcity and competition. But that's not what nature was showing me. Nature was showing me incredible beauty and possibility, standing just beyond the rat race, saying, hello, hello. I mean, come on, Mother Nature never stood in front of a forest and said, there is one great photograph hidden here. One photographer will find it, and the rest of you will be hopeless losers. Nature said, how many cards you got, DeWitt? Bring it on. Bring it on. I'll fill it up. I'll fill it up with beauty and possibility beyond your wildest imaginings, right down to my tiniest seed. And that was just a much more elegant philosophy, a much more compassionate way of looking at the universe. And at some point, I just decided to embrace it. I just decided that if I had a choice between a world based on scarcity and fear and one based on possibility, then man, I was choosing possibility. And no matter how dry and desolate, no matter how bleak and devoid of possibilities a situation might seem, that if I could just celebrate the best in it, in this case just by dropping down into that slot canyon and looking back the other way, I could find a perspective that would transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. Through that lens of celebration, I could see one of nature's most important lessons. There's more than one right answer. There's more than one right answer. There are 1,000 ways to come at any challenge, to find that extraordinary view. And I know it so easily from my time at the Geographic. They sent me up to the town of Smith River in Northern California. They raise about 80% of the Easter lilies in the country around that village. That's the story I had to tell. And I've got a perspective where I got picked lilies and unpicked lilies and the boy picking them. One right answer. Pretty good one. But as a photographer, I never think of stopping there. I took this picture, immediately I grabbed another lens, walked over a couple rows, knelt down and found another right answer. Same parameters of the problem, now seen from a totally different point of view. And my favorite right answer that day was this one. This is an advanced levitation technique that I picked up along the way. So, 3 right answers. So many things begin to change when you come at the world from that perspective of more than one right answer. I mean, first of all, you never look for just one right answer. There's always more. But then as you begin to find more and more of them, you just get more and more comfortable with reframing obstacles into opportunities. Geographic sent me to the Selkirk Mountains of British Columbia. Gorgeous area. I'm wandering around. I found a field of dandelions. I should have been ecstatic, but I wasn't. I don't know why. Instead of grabbing my cameras and running into it, I took a snapshot. I said, I don't know, the light's not quite right. I'll come back tomorrow. I didn't engage. We all know what happens when you don't engage. Tomorrow turns into the next day turns into the next week, and by the time I got back to that field, no more dandelions. I had puffballs. I wanted dandelions. I had puffballs, and I'm just about to leave when this little voice in my head says, DeWitt, what's here to celebrate? What's right with this situation? You wanted dandelions. You got puffballs. 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 Pretty soon I'm down on the ground with the puffballs. I'm rolling around with the puffballs. I'm on top of the puffballs. I'm underneath the puffballs. And all of a sudden, whoa. Whoa. That extraordinary view. It always seemed to be there when I could look through that lens of celebration. Extraordinary image. But I can already hear the cynics grumbling. DeWitt, you are such a Pollyanna. You know, the world is in flames. War, terrorism, poverty, global warming, and you're shooting puffballs? Well, to the cynics I say, change your lens. Celebrating what's right is not a perspective that denies the very real pain and suffering that exists on this planet. Rather, it's a perspective that puts those problems into a larger, more balanced context. A context when we can see that there's far more right with the world than there is wrong with it. When I put on that lens of celebration, when I really allow myself to see and connect with the beauty of the world, I feel like I'm a cup that's so full it's just about to overflow. I feel like I'm falling in love. That's what it feels like. I mean, think about it. Think about a time when you've been in love and you get up in the morning and you stagger into the bath and you go, the toothbrush. What a miracle. You know? It's followed by the soap dish and the towel, you know? I mean, the whole world is beautiful and you are so full and so fired up. And that doesn't surprise me because when we're in love, we're in touch with a source of incredible energy. We call it passion. Passion. What most of us wouldn't give to be connected to that energy of passion on a daily basis. Well, extraordinary visions do that. They release passion. So no matter how strange a situation that I walk into, the first thing I'm going to ask is, what's here to celebrate? What am I falling in love with? Well, in this case, it's easy because that happens to be my daughter. Most dads would help their daughter in this situation. But it didn't matter. You know, whenever I could get a lock on what was right with the situation, then I was passionate, energized to enhance that and get rid of everything else. Instead of starting, as we so often do, by griping about what's wrong with the situation, what's right with it? Because that connects us with our passion. That energizes us. Celebrating what's right gives us the energy to find that next right answer. As Michelangelo once said, I saw an angel in the stone and carved to set it free. I saw an angel in the stone and carved to set it free. Every day, we get to choose what lens we see the world with. It's our choice. And you know, the more I do that, the more I choose the lens of celebration, the more I find, both in my photography, but way more important in my life, that the difference between a good frame and a great frame is far, far closer than I ever would have dreamed. Good frame, a morning glory on the beach in Maury, 10 inches away. Great frame, great frame. Good frame, a cowboy in Bryce Canyon, believe it or not, named Binky. Binky. I'm taking Binky's picture and I'm loving it. But then I just backed Binky up about 30 feet into the doorway of the barn. Great frame. Great frame. Good frame. The Golden Gate Bridge at sunset with a new moon rising. Man, how does it get any better? 15 minutes later. Great frame. Change your lens. Change your life. So I lecture all over the country, you know, to all different kinds of people. And you know what? They all hunger for this lens of celebration. They all want to try it on. We all have it. It's right there waiting to be picked up. Why don't we do it? Well, maybe it's because every day the internet and the media bombard us with all that's wrong with the world. And it's so easy to buy into it. It's so easy to stare into that darkness. But wouldn't you rather focus on the light rather than the dark? Wouldn't you rather focus on what's right rather than what's wrong? That's the change we make when we put on that lens of celebration. Do I have that lens on all the time? No, come on, I'm human. But a long time ago, I was given a touchstone and a guide that should I ever take it off, help me put it right back on. And I'd like to give both of those to you tonight. by telling you the story of how they came into my possession. I was photographing on an island off the coast of British Columbia, and it wasn't going well. The weather was gloomy, so were my pictures, but you know, I was getting ready to go out there again. I got a big camera bag and a huge tripod, and I looked up, and on the steps of the lodge where I was staying, there sat a 5-year-old boy. A 5-year-old boy with a very big smile on his face. And he looked down at me and he said, "Do you have a camera?" I was festooned with cameras. You know? I said, "Yeah, I got one." And then he raised his hand, and I realized why he asked, because he had a magic camera. It was yellow. It had a blue lens. It had a red eyepiece and a turquoise rewind knob with a little straw coming out of it. And he said, "Can I photograph with you?" Well, that was about the last thing I wanted to have happen, but I didn't know how to say no, so I said, "Oh, come on." You know. So we went down into the woods, and I got my first shot. And then this kid was so cute. He squeezed in front of the tripod like this, you know, backed up against it, raised his hand. "Did you get it?" "Yeah." And again, that smile. Well, we kept going. Me shooting and grousing, him shooting and smiling, you know. And it started to rain. It started to rain. And I was setting up, you know, what I thought was the last dismal shot of a dismal day. And he's just sitting next to me in the grass, looking very intently at all of my gear. And finally, he raised his face toward me and he said, "Does your camera have juice in it?" I said, "No." He said, "Mine does." Sucked on that little straw. God, his question almost knocked me over. Did my camera have juice in it? No, mine didn't, and his did. I was the one who had the wrong perspective. I was the one who'd lost the passion to find that next right answer. And there wasn't anything more to say. I went out and bought myself a juice camera. And every day, Adam and this camera remind me to celebrate what's right with the world. And every time I do, every time I allow myself to fall in love, you know, with all of it, I really do see a world of light and possibility. Come on, you've all seen it. Not just in the faces of your children and your grandchildren. It's out there all the time. And you know, the beauty of that world, our world, shows us a wonderful example of how to live, of how to love, of a banquet laid, of a cup overflowing. And I know that if we let that beauty fill us up, that we too will overflow. And it'll come out in everything we do. In the ideals we hold, in the passion and compassion we feel, in the love we are no longer afraid to express. That perspective, that lens, it'll change your life as it has changed mine. See that vision, my friends, and celebrate what's right with the world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. So I think that video provided a great perspective on what we're trying to achieve in this project, and celebrating what's right with the world was what I was already doing. I just hadn't thought of it that way. So I want to go to one of the ideas he presented in this video of finding the extraordinary view, or what he called the great frame, by changing perspectives. So I'm going to screen share again and just show you a couple of examples from some of my own recent photography. Now, my great frames aren't as astounding as his, but I think they're not bad. So here we go. So this was a couple of weeks ago. I was walking in the Parliament Hill area. So, and it was the first time in quite a while I'd actually gone up onto Parliament Hill. So I got this photo of the Peace Tower. And you know, I had to cut out a lot at the bottom to hide all the construction, and even still you see some scaffolding. So yeah, okay picture, but nothing special. I wouldn't post this in Facebook. So I kept going on my walk, and got several different perspectives. And this is the one I consider to be my great frame of Parliament Hill, because I was looking at it from a completely different perspective. This is looking through some trees down at the bottom of the step locks where the Rideau Canal empties into the Ottawa River. So this was my favorite that day. But another pretty good one is this one taken in Majors Hill Park. And then a week later, I got this one from in behind the Supreme Court building, which is a place I'd never gone in my life before. But again, it gave me a different perspective on Parliament Hill. And then I want to show you one more example from my outing at Mer Bleu on October 3rd. My friend and I were walking and rounded a corner and kind of stopped and said, wow, when we saw this crabapple tree absolutely loaded with apples. So this was my first shot, and it's pretty good. And I took 6 more after this, and then I took this one. This was my last one, and this is what I consider my great frame of this crabapple tree. And the reasons I say that, I think what really makes this photograph is the golden leaves in the background in the upper left-hand side, the huge concentration of apples, colorful apples in that same top left quadrant, and kind of the nice diagonal transition from the top left to the bottom right, where you have sky in the top left, then you have the tree and the leaves, and you gradually transition to a more green and darker down in the bottom right-hand corner. So that's just a couple of examples from my own photography. Now, just bear with me a second. I get ready to show you something else. So now I want to switch and talk to you about how this is going to work going forward. So I'm going to share my screen again and go back into Facebook. So this is where we were before, but now I'm going to go into groups. And this is a new group that was just set up by Jen Brennan for us on Thursday. It's called Photovoice. It's under the Unitarians for Climate Action group that Mike was involved in setting up. And I did a posting yesterday just to explain how this was going to work. And it's some of the same things that you heard Suzanne talk about earlier. So we're very close to making this available to other people. As this proves, the Facebook group has been created, and the next step is to set up the necessary group administration. One of the things I know I can already do is send invitations to interested people to join this group. And then once you're a member of the group, you can post photos and captions. And as it explains here, and Suzanne mentioned this, the idea is to take 2 photos and tell one story about them. And one photo will show us an environmental crisis as each individual sees it. I haven't done it yet, but one of the photos that comes to my mind that I could easily find, and something quite disturbing that's going on in the pandemic, is the way that people are just discarding, randomly littering face masks. And then the second photo is is something good in nature, celebrating what's right with the world. And then in terms of talking about those photos, we're suggesting that participants respond to these 3 questions. Why did I choose these photos? How was I feeling during those times? And what is one action that I can do to help Mother Earth become healthier? So stay tuned. We'll be telling you soon how you can become a member of this group. Keep an eye on the EUU. And I'm also thinking that we should do a story in the next Parkway Spire, which I think will come out at the beginning of December, about this whole project. And you've already heard the last part here. We will also provide an email submission option, because we know not everybody wants to use Facebook or has the technology to do so. So we're going to set up an email address that people can use to submit things to this group. And the name I'm proposing for that is Photovoice at firstunitarianottawa.ca. So I'll be asking Jen in the next couple of days if she can set that up. So I'm excited about helping to launch this project. Sharon got me involved because she saw what I was doing in Facebook and saw the connection to this project. And I can't wait to see what I anticipate will be some amazing and thought-provoking photos and stories. And that's the end of my presentation. So I thank you for listening and watching. And now it's time for the Q&A. So over to you, Mike.
Great, thanks, Maury. I like a lot of your shots. The preferred one of the crabapple tree reminds me of a jigsaw puzzle because it's got different color areas, and we had a family tradition of always doing a jigsaw puzzle at New Year's, and there'd be a war over who does what parts of the puzzle, because the blue pieces go to my dad and different colors go to different people, and nobody wanted the sky because the sky is just impossible to do. So I don't know, somehow when I saw it a week ago, that's what I thought of. So you discussed all the photography you've done through your life. So tell me, shades of what our friend on TED Talks was saying, if we take all the slides and the film out of your house, does it collapse?
No, but there'd be a few empty pieces of furniture.
Uh-huh. Wow. I bet.
Where I have all these boxes of slides stored, and that's a huge project I still have ahead of me, is digitizing those. Let's see, how many would it be? 37 years of slides, I guess it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. One thing that comes up as just an observational type thought about this whole exercise is, before I head out to take pictures, I've seen pictures I like and don't like about the environment. And, I've seen this morning, just out of interest, I was going through pictures of the tar sands, and if you do tar sands images on Google, you get a lot of pretty ghastly looking images of the world's largest industrial development. But I think what'll be an interesting challenge will be, I think we all have pictures we've seen. I mean, you mentioned people littering mass. We've all had pictures we've seen that are not very nice at all. And great pictures like the ones we've just been looking at. And I think it'll be an interesting exercise to go out now and take some of those pictures. Because I think everything we have seen and we hear about are kind of a frame of reference for us. So I think that's what'll make this exercise really interesting. Will be to think about what we know and what we think about and start relating it to a couple pictures. I think it's going to be very, very thought-provoking and a really good exercise. So those are comments I have about what I think is a great initiative. And I'll get on to some questions. Here's one from Andrew. Do you find that the technical details of photography, the window closed. Do you find the technical details of photography get in the way of artistry of your photography, or as a scientist, does the technical aspects actually enhance the experience for you? Interesting question.
So that is a good question, and it actually reminds me of a comment I was originally thinking I'd make before the video when I was talking about my history in photography, because it actually highlights one of the key differences between film and digital photography, and in particular using smartphones as cameras. So when I was using that old 35 millimeter camera, and it had a built-in light meter, which for its time was fairly advanced. It wasn't through the lens metering, which was a more expensive, more advanced technology. But when you set the camera up according to what the light meter was telling you, you still had to select the combination of shutter speed and f-stop that you wanted to use for the picture. So you were making a manual selection. And you could get, if you were, for example, photographing something that was in motion, you would want to select the fastest possible shutter speed. But if you wanted to get the type of effect where you wanted something very close to the camera to be in focus and the background to be blurry, then you would select a large aperture or a large lens opening or f-stop. And you had to be quite conscious of those things when you were taking the picture. And also when you were limited by the fact that you had 36 pictures on your roll, and it was a bit of a pain to change rolls of film. And if you were on a trip, you might have only brought 4 or 5 rolls, and you might not be near some place where you can buy more. You had to be very conscious of how many pictures you were taking. Whereas in digital photography, that completely changed, especially as the capacity of memory cards for cameras exploded. So basically now you can take virtually unlimited pictures, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because if you take too many, then sorting them later is challenging. Like at Mer Bleu that day a week ago yesterday, I took 64 photos, and I put 17 in the Facebook posting, and getting that down from 64 to 17, which is probably still too many, was challenging. But to get to Andrew's question, particularly now with a smartphone camera like the iPhone, it is, I think it's possible to use an iPhone the way you use the manual camera if you want to do some really high-end photography. But it is so, its software is so sophisticated that I don't really worry about the technical stuff right now, because the camera software itself in the iPhone almost always makes the right decisions for a particular scene. And I'm thinking of one I took in late August, where I had the moon rising over a lake and a campfire in the background. Sorry, a campfire in the foreground and the moon rising over the lake and shining off the lake in the background. That with an old style camera and having to set up things manually would be a challenging shot to do. But the iPhone took an absolutely stunning photo that had exactly the right lighting balance between those two sources of light. And it just did that on its own. So my job was really just framing the photo and pressing the shutter. So I hope that's a rather long answer, but.
That's great. Yeah, I really appreciate what you say about, only so many picks on a roll, and if you burn through them, then there's a job. That's very true. I did photography with my dad, back in the day, and that was something we experienced. There's a question about if we can share the presentation, the TED Talk.
Yeah, absolutely. You mean put the URL in the chat, for example? Or
yeah, we could do that.
The intent is that it will be part of the recording, but also in the description for the recording when it gets posted, we can include a link to the video.
And we can put I think we can put the link on the new group page that you've set up and the existing Climb Action page as well.
Yeah, good idea. And I actually almost did that last night. And when I was putting that first posting in the Photovoice group, and I said, no, I'll wait until after the presentation tomorrow, and then post the link to the video. Yeah, so good idea.
Right.
I think I see Carmen Contreras has her hand up raised. So Carmen, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure, thank you, Maury. I was actually typing the question in the chat to Mike Fletcher because I was instructed to do so, but I will stop typing. Thank you for sharing a really wonderful presentation. My question is, how do we tie our sense of awe, wonder, and beauty about our natural world that is always helping us be in that frame of mind that the person in your TED Talk was talking about, which is to have, the right frame and to accept that there is a lot of right answers. But how do we tie that up with being environmental activists? I mean, and the reason I'm asking this question, maybe I should just add a little bit more, is that in my own personal experience, I am very easily captured by the sense of beauty of the natural world that surrounds me. I live in a really beautiful city, in a country that is filled with natural beauty to the brim. But I don't know how many of you might have seen that movie Anthropocene. So I feel that for me, it's easy to get carried away and maybe even complacent in the sense of beauty because I am surrounded by it. But I want to know, how do I go from there with this congregation to becoming more of an activist? So I think, that's basically my question.
Thank you, Carmen. Actually, your question reminds me of the talk that Graham Saul did for us. I think it was on September 20th. And I think for me, one of the key takeaways from Graham's presentation was that yes, nature is at risk because of climate change, and we need to protect it. But one of the things that will lead us to protect nature is to enhance our appreciation of it, and that will motivate us to protect it. So that's kind of the short answer I would give to your question, because certainly nature has always been important in my life, and because it's so important, I'm motivated to work to protect it. Have you received other questions, Mike? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. So just a question, and this is kind of a good question for wrapping up. We're approaching 10 o'clock. What suggestions do you have for the fall?
I'm wondering if the question has to do with photography in the fall, or is it related to, I think, the anxiety many people are feeling now with the pandemic and winter approaching, that doing things outdoors for many people isn't going to be as pleasant. I don't know if maybe whoever asked the question could add a bit to that.
It's both those things. It's both those things, Maury. Can you hear me?
Yep. Okay.
I also
Thank you.
wanted to say thank you so much. And I think that all of the photography is about light, and it shows your light within and shares great light with us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I enjoy getting outdoors in all seasons. It's very rarely in the winter, and I'm a keen cross-country skier, that it's so cold and miserable that I might be driven in early or not want to get out. So I encourage people to get out as much as possible, even as fall progresses and winter approaches and takes hold. And the key really is about dressing properly for it. And as Mike mentioned, is that he was setting up outdoors for this session. It helps a lot when you keep moving. And I was mentioning, when I'm cross-country skiing, I sometimes stop and take pictures, and I have to take off my mitts to do that, and sometimes even my inner gloves. So you learn to be quite fast because on a smartphone you have to touch the screen to take the photo and set it up. I actually do have inner gloves that most of the time do work on a touch screen. They were actually advertised as being designed for that. So that's something you might want to look for in winter. That there are inner gloves you can buy that are made in a way that they're supposed to still allow you to use a touch screen. The other problem I have, and many of us have experienced it with face masks as well in the winter, is especially often when I'm out in the winter and it's very bright, I'm wearing both sunglasses and regular glasses, and I might have my face covered even pre-pandemic, and fogging of my glasses can be quite a problem. So in that case, I just take them off. Anyway, those are some tips. So I would encourage people to if you're not accustomed to getting out in the winter, to try it more. And in fact, winter in Ottawa is often we get a lot of beautiful sunshine in the winter here, and it's something to take advantage of.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. So it's just after 10 o'clock. I'll move us out of the formal session. As is usual with Sunday Forum and our Speaks, conversation will continue for another quarter of an hour. Suzanne, did you want to just have some closing remarks about next steps with Photovoice?
Actually, I think Maury would be better to answer that question.
Okay, excellent. Go ahead, Maury.
So I think it's what I said earlier. Stay tuned for more information in the very near future, and I may even start testing this out by sending some of you invitations to join the group in the next couple of days to help get it started. So I'll stop the recording here, and we can move into the informal part.